Hi everyone, welcome to this video. So today I'm going to answer some of your questions about the presentation I did last week about nature and wildlife in the UK. It's great, you had so many questions. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. So the first question was, is it true that it always rains diagonally in the UK? So when it rains, it doesn't go like this, it goes like this. It's not true that it always happens, but I think sometimes it does happen because when it rains, it's also very windy. There's a lot of wind. So the water's coming down and the wind blows, and then the rain sort of goes diagonally like this. So you see this especially, when it's very windy, especially in the countryside. Sometimes the rain sort of looks like a curtain, like one of these being pulled across the landscape. So it doesn't always happen diagonally, but sometimes it does. Okay, question 2. Do I agree with the reintroduction of wildlife to the UK? So this is like bears and wolves, lynx, beavers. I think it would be a good idea, definitely, to try it, do a test, sort of introduce these animals to a small area of the UK and look at the results, because they say it helps to rebalance the ecosystem and protect the environment. So maybe first they could reintroduce to a smaller area and look at the results and then expand it. But the UK has many parts of the country where there aren't many people living, so it would be quite safe and easy to reintroduce this wildlife. Okay, how many of the 15 national parks have I visited? It's a good question. I think I've visited all of the national parks in England, apart from the Peak District, which is right in the middle of England. But I haven't visited the national parks in Wales. So I haven't been to Snowdonia or Pembrokeshire or Brecon Beacons. And I haven't visited the national parks in Scotland, so Loch Lomond and the Cairngorms. I haven't visited. But the main ones in the UK, in England, sorry, almost all of the ones in England. I live close to the Yorkshire Dales National Park. This is where I'm from. So if you look at the map, you can also see close to the Yorkshire Dales, we have the North York Moors National Park, Lake District National Park, and Northumberland National Park. So in a smallish area, you have 4 national parks. And that's where I'm from. So it's kind of easy to visit these places. So almost all. I need to go to the national parks in Wales and Scotland. So what sports have I done in the national parks or outdoors? So mainly walking, hiking, and camping. I guess so, like walking and then camping and walking again. I have also done cycling on a bike, and what else? I've also done sort of canoeing or kayaking, like in a boat where you row like this on a river. But I've never done extreme sports like paragliding or bungee jumping, these sorts of things. So just the standard hiking, cycling, canoeing. Yeah. Okay, question number 5 is do you know the rules for camping in the national parks? So it depends on what part of the UK you are in. Because in England and Wales, when you go camping, you have to camp on a official campsite, like a camping ground, where people go and they put their tents, um, and they pay. It's not too expensive. Uh, they pay per night for the tent. Um, so this is in England and Wales. You need to camp on a campsite. But in Scotland, the law is a bit different. The rules are different. And in Scotland, you can camp anywhere. Anywhere in the country, you're allowed to camp. So you don't have to be on a campsite. You can walk in the national park and then stop wherever you want and camp. There's no rules and you don't have to pay. So Scotland is the best for camping, definitely, I think, because it's more flexible. Okay, question number 6. We have, what factors have influenced climate change in the UK? So I'm not an expert scientist, but as I said in the presentation, in the UK we're having more extreme weather. So the weather is the same as before, just more extreme. So in the winter and in the spring, it rains a lot more than before. So there's a lot more rain, and this causes flooding sometimes. And in the summer, often it is a lot drier than before. So there's less rain. It's dry and hot, and this means that places become very dry. Often there are fires in the countryside, like forest fires, this sort of thing, because of everything being very dry. It burns very easily. So this is how climate change has influenced the UK, with weather becoming more extreme. So hotter and drier in the summer, and wetter in the winter or autumn or spring. Okay. Question number 7. We have, what do I do to help improve or help in combat climate change in my daily life? So I guess it's important we all sort of do individual actions as well as collective actions as a society to combat climate change and protect against climate change. So some of the things I do, I recycle. So I do recycling. So all of my rubbish that is paper or glass or metal or plastic, I put in the recycling rather than the sort of rubbish. So you separate these so things can be recycled and used again. And then also I, especially in England, I often cycle to a lot of places rather than go in a car or by transport. I prefer to cycle, which is obviously good for the environment because it doesn't use any petrol or anything. So cycling, recycling, and also, I guess I'm vegetarian, so I don't eat any meat because, well, I've been vegetarian for a long time, but also meat or the meat production industry has a sort of negative impact on the environment. So I guess by being vegetarian, I have a smaller amount of an impact on the planet. And another thing that is good to do, that I try and do, is to eat the food I eat, to eat seasonally. So only eat certain foods when they are available in the country, and they're not flown from a different country to the UK. Yeah. So yeah, this is how I combat climate change. Question number 8. How can people preserve national parks in the UK? It's a good question. So obviously everyone has to, when they visit a national park, they have to sort of respect the rules to help preserve the national parks. How can people do this? Well, by staying, for example, if they go walking and hiking, by staying on the paths, yeah, and following the signs, staying on the paths, and not walking like in the nature, standing on flowers and things like this. So if people follow the paths and the signs where they're meant to walk, this is one way to help preserve it. Another is obviously don't drop any rubbish, any litter on the floor, or pick up any litter that you see. So if you see an empty can of Coca-Cola or a packet of biscuits on the floor, pick it up and put it in a bin. Also, especially when there are other animals, so when there are cows or sheep, it's important if you have like a dog to keep the dog on a lead. If there's no animals, it's okay, the dog can go and run. But when there are animals, it's better to keep the dog on a lead and protect it, to protect the other animals. And how else can people preserve natural parks? I guess so there's also certain rules and laws against construction and building new developments, new buildings in national parks, because they would have a negative impact on the national parks. So this is also a way to preserve national parks, is to control like new buildings, new construction. Okay, question number 9. Do you know how bears disappeared and why was it not prevented? Yes, so bears disappeared from the UK like several hundred years ago. I think about 300 years ago, 400 years ago, maybe longer. Yeah, like 400 or 500 years ago, bears disappeared from the UK. And they disappeared because they were hunted, like, because in the past, a lot more people lived in the countryside and they had animals like cows or sheep. So farmers would kill bears and wolves because they would be a danger to the animals. And also people hunted more in the past. So there were 400 years ago, 500 years ago, there wasn't a campaign to protect bears or anything. So they all got killed and they disappeared.